I'm Mark Buchanan, and I'm the Deputy Chief in charge of the Safety, Health, and Wellness Division of the Boston Fire Department. The last one we had was back in 2017, and in this time and age, there's a lot of stress out there. So this is really good, this resilience seminar, to help us all the best way possible to bounce back from tragedies and incidents that affect our stress level. We have a very good lineup of union representation here today, but I want to reach out to Commissioner Jack Dempsey for providing us with the tools to provide all this knowledge to all the surrounding communities and to the spouses of the fire department. So Commissioner Dempsey has provided the fire department with a lot of gym equipment, which helps save us with the stress program. And you know, we all have the AP program and a peer support team, which helps us all in times of crisis. With further ado, our host, Commissioner Dempsey. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Resilience Seminar. I want to thank Deputy Chief Mark Buchanan, our whole Safety, Health, and Wellness Division, Local 718 Vice President John Sarro, our brothers from the PFFM, President Richie McKinnon, IAFF 3rd District Vice President Jay Colbert, IAFF General President Edzo Kelly, Dr. Hamrock, who is a driving force behind firefighter health and wellness, Adam Laroux and his O2X program, along with all the presenters today. We all know that firefighting can be an extremely stressful job, and that stress isn't left at work. We always seem to take it home with us, back to our families, and then they have to find a way to cope with us. So building resilience is key in dealing with stress and trauma. You're going to hear from a lot of very special people today who will give you some insight in how to develop this useful skill. And thank you for attending.
Thank you, Commissioner Dempsey. Next speaking will be the Vice President of Local 718, John Sarro.
Thank you, Deputy. First, I'd like to thank Commissioner Dempsey for all he does. Deputy Buchanan and his team from the Health and Wellness, and also all the volunteers through the department. And a special shout out to O2X for being there and showing us how we can make things better. So I just want to thank everybody.
Thank you, Johnny. Next up would be the President of Professional Firefighters in Massachusetts, Rich McKinnon.
Thank you all for welcoming me here. I just want to thank the leadership of the Boston Fire Department, as well as the leadership of Boston Fire Local 718 for opening up this event to all the PFFM members that are here, and to you, welcome. I want to thank you all. You know, we say we have a firefighter family. It's not just the firefighters that we work with every day at the firehouse. It's you. It's our wives. It's our children. It's our other loved ones at home. And we know that you're in there with us. And we at the PFFM have made it a priority to bring member assistance to our members, to make it available. They're there 24/7. They do an unbelievable job. They work well with the Boston team that is phenomenal as well across the state. Just know that help is there. We realize that trauma that we see, we do bring it back to our homes, and you have to deal with us sometimes when we can be a bear. But just know that help is there. The help is there for you. It's there for your loved one. You just have to ask. So I thank everyone and taking the time to participate. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Next up would be the IAFF 3rd District Vice President, Jay Colbert.
Thank you, Chief Buchanan, and I want to thank Commissioner Dempsey and Local 718 Vice President John Sarro for working to put this thing together. This is a collaboration of labor and management down here with this department that is unmatched throughout my district, and it's really something that a lot of our locals should strive for, to have that kind of communication that they have between labor and management. First off, guys, I'd like to thank all of you for making an effort to get down here. You know, whatever it is, your reasoning for being here, some may be suffering or had feelings, you know, PTSD in the past. Some may be living or working beside someone who had those feelings. Or maybe some people were just curious about behavioral health and what we're doing for it. And as a newly appointed health and safety chairman of our IAFF Health and Safety Committee, so by our General President Ed Kelly, I'm really getting a little lot of nascent knowledge about what goes on into this. And one of the things I've learned in my rudimentary exposure to behavioral health is that, you know, some people struggle and dip. Some people struggle and grow. And one of the reasons for a seminar like this is so that we can increase the number of people who struggle and grow and decrease the number of people who struggle and suffer continuously. So it's incumbent upon you people to go back to your families, your stations, your unions, and you know, spread this word. Like the Bible said in my Catholic school education, go forth and multiply. Well, go back to the stations in your jobs and get as many people converted to the behavioral health awareness that our members are suffering from, and make this a prudent decision of yours to come down here and invest some time, much time as you can, to help as many people as you can. And this will be the greater benefit of this seminar. And thank you all for coming once again, and thank you, Chief Buchanan, for putting this together.
Thanks, Jay. Next up would be the IAFF General President, Ed Kelly.
Thanks, Chief Buchanan. Thanks for all you do. It's great to have someone the deputy rank level that takes it very, very serious, all of our aspects of health and safety. And that we've also been very blessed here in Boston in having leadership at the very top that doesn't forget where they came from. And Commissioner Dempsey truly cares and invests in all of our well-being, whether it's, you know, equipment for the fire ground, or whether it's making sure that our home life, when we have struggles, that we, as a department on his side of the house, are here for everybody. And that's an important aspect of who we are and what we do when you think about what our job is. The other side of that house is the union. And we know that the one constant that we can trust as firefighters is each other. And when you look at the big picture, the union is each other. So having partners on the management side of the house, like Commissioner Dempsey and Chief Buchanan, who's still a union member, but, you know, on the top tier of leadership in the department, that want to partner with the union to make sure that we're working together to protect each other. That's the best case scenario, and we all know that doesn't always happen. We've always had chiefs of department spot, and sometimes commissioners that have supported us. But we've also had times in this city where the city side of management has abandoned us. And what we're doing today is such a strive forward when you think about the amazing program that was put together today in partnership with the IAFF. And I know I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the leadership from the IAFF in this behavioral health sector and the work that they've done. But the O2X program, spearheaded by Laroux, who's a long-time value add to every IAFF Local 718 and some of the other locals that they do work with, whether it's teaching our members nutrition or the more difficult challenges to grasp, like behavioral health. But they have a great program for you, and I commend them for it. In our world, you know, we have leadership. You just heard from my partner for a long, long time, Jay Colbert, who we've been working together for about 15 years now. When he was president of Somerville and I was president of Boston, then we served on the state board together as legislative agents, and then as president and secretary treasurer of the PFFM, and now as on the IFF executive board, that we couldn't have a greater champion in the 3rd District than Jay Colbert, and who believes in what we're doing here this morning. And, you know, Richie McKinnon, our state president, that we grew up 2 streets apart. He was a year ahead of me at St. Anne's up the street there, whose father worked on the job a long time, 718, probably did 4 years on 718 on the BFD. Great guy. And Billy Cabral's also here from New Bedford, the secretary treasurer of the PFFM. And my own, our president, Johnny Soares, couldn't be here this morning. He had some other obligations, but very ably represented by Johnny Sorrow and other members of the executive here. But I appreciate all of you taking the time to get here. You know, I like to define the role of the union, of the IAFF, as our mission starts in front of a church. And it doesn't matter what got our brother or sister to that point. It's our obligation to each other to work backwards from there and do everything in our power to prevent that from happening again. And one of the major drivers of loss of life among the IFF is succumbing to behavioral health challenges. And you can't deny that our job exposes us to traumas. You know, there's certain things we see that you can't unsee. I try to put it in a perspective that when you study resiliency, they talk about spirituality, about life being bigger than self. And I ascribe to that theory. It's a challenge sometimes to put faith in a higher power ahead of your fears. But I also look at when, you know, I've had my share of ugly calls. I look at it like God chose me to be there to take care of that person to the best of my ability so that their family knows somebody cared. And I think it's an honor to be able to serve in a capacity that when tragedy happens, we're the tip of the spear of going to either try to pull that person back from the precipice of death or make sure they're treated with dignity so that their family has some comfort. And it's an order to maintain that perspective. But we owe it to each other to do so. And I think that as the union, we always endeavor, whatever the issues are that come at us as firefighters, we try to find a way to meet the challenge. Same way as when the bell rings and we go out the door, no matter what the situation is, sometimes our best tool is duct tape. You know, we do what we got to do to meet that challenge. And that is what the union tries to do. And in this realm, we've spent a long time trying to meet that challenge. And with us this morning, I'd like to recognize Will, the guy who's in the front right row. For over 30 years, Willie's worked in the IAFF, helped not only to build what was our EAP program, but help shepherd in its next generation of behavioral health. He serves on the Behavioral Health Committee and helped put this together today and has done an incredible job. He helped make the Boston Fire Department EAP program, which is a joint 718 union management program, the model across the international. And we're very lucky to have him here with us this morning. Thank you, Willie. I'd also like to recognize Dr. Michael Hamrock, who you're going to hear from in a few minutes, a true a saint amongst us in the Boston Fire Department. Michael came on the job in the 1980s. He worked in Brighton and then Rosie? Eastie and Rosie. Put himself through medical school, became a doctor, worked as the department doctor for a number of years, really changed the paradigm in health on the Boston Fire Department in every aspect, whether it was identifying the need for cardiac training and trying to reduce the number of heart attacks, taking on the cancer battle at various levels, and has really become an authority in the behavioral health sector here in Boston. And both Willie and Hamrock, I'm proud to say, are serving on the IFF's Center of Excellence Advisory Board. So one of the things that the IFF has done is partnered with a rehab specialist and built our own Center of Excellence in Maryland, just for IFF members. We've served about 1,900 of our brothers and sisters down there. We've also just entered into an agreement to build a West Coast Center of Excellence in California. And we're also going to explore putting one in the Midwest. In Canada, for our brothers and sisters up in Canada, it's a little different healthcare system. We're in the process of partnering with a very esteemed provider in Canada for our members. But along the way, where we started off as basically the IF EAP program, where we would put on AA meetings at all of our events, in the mornings, we've morphed and grown significantly. We now have online recovery programs, especially in the advent of the pandemic, that we've had about 300 meetings, I think, online, which have serviced our members throughout the international. We've also brought in a whole section of behavioral health training. We have behavioral health awareness training. We have peer support, where we've trained 6,800 IAFF members to do peer support. We have a resiliency training program, which one of it's an online component. We also have a disaster response peer support program. You know, a lot of places like the wildfires or the hurricanes they endure down south in Florida. It's probably nothing, not nothing, but it's incredibly stressful to lose your home and try to relocate and get your kids into school. You know, it's a very important part of what we do when we respond to those disasters. We also have safety planning intervention for suicide prevention. And we also have a class for understanding the fire service for behavioral health specialists. Our peer support teams, we've trained about 19,000 IAFF members so far in all of those various genres, primarily in behavioral health awareness. But those 6,800 peer support team members have become crucial. I've been the general president for 6 months now, and I can tell you that the most often requested assistance to IFF headquarters is far and away peer support. We've sent teams to high-profile issues like the LA County shooting, where we had an off-duty member come in and murder another member and shoot another IFF member that he worked with. We also sent members down to the Surfside collapse down in Miami Beach. But then there's also everyday incidences where our members need assistance. You know, we just had the issue this week, the fire up in Manchester, that they did an incredibly heroic job. And one of our members, the captain up there, was, I'm sure most of you know, severely burned performing rescues. That's a lot on them. It's a lot on him. It's a lot on his family. And I think one of the great aspects of what we're doing here today is that we want to make sure that our loved ones that have to endure the sacrifices that we take on are also know that they're part of our family, that these resources are here for them too, that if they're hurting, we're hurting, and we can't be good employees if we're carrying that type of stress, and we're not going to do the best job that we can. So the IFF is doing everything in our power to make sure that we're building the resources that our members need to be a value add to brothers and sisters that need help. And the most important thing that I think we can do for each other is recognize when someone needs help and try to get them the resources that they need. And I think that's crucial. And I can tell you, sometimes, you know, depression hides. Sometimes, you know, they say that the smiling face hides the sad clown, right? Sometimes it's not that hidden. Sometimes it's the guy that keeps breaking out in handcuffs or doesn't show up to work on time twice a month, or misses runs because they can't get out of bed. It's living in their, you know, brother's garage. Sometimes it's in plain sight. And oftentimes, we tend to rally around those that need help by covering for them, by protecting them from the bosses. And I got to say, I've been around, I mean, I played on all roles, all sides of that equation. And I can tell you now, after I'm in my 25th year now, been around the block a few more trips around the sun. I can tell you, we're not helping our brothers and sisters when we watch the circle the way down. We're better off trying to confront them and trying to get them the help that they need, convince them that they need help. It's not an easy task. That's a big one. But if you want to be a true brother or sister, sometimes you got to put that on the line. So God bless. And as Jay said, bring it back home to your firehouse. And thanks again. And Chief, keep up the good work. Commish, thank you. Good luck, everybody.
Thanks, Ed Kelly. Next, I'd like to introduce a friend of mine, also my doctor. I work with Mike, Dr. Hamrock, as a firefighter. Dr. Hamrock has spearheaded a lot of health issues on the Boston Fire Department. We have a great cancer screening, and he was able to get us a cardiac screening program through the medical community, Beth Israel and St. Elizabeth's, and also Mass General now has reached to work with the surrounding communities in the Boston area. So with that, Dr. Hamrock.
Thank you, Chief Buchanan, and your team from the Health, Safety, Wellness Division, Commissioner Local 718, and Adam Laroux and his team from O2X for really bringing this program forward. I think it's vitally important for the fire service. Fire department is on the map across the country now about cancer prevention, early detection, and treatment, and I think it's led the way in the fire service on that. And it's now time we do the same thing with behavioral health issues. There's more people, unfortunately, more morbidity, mortality from behavioral health issues in the fire service than there are from cancer, heart disease, and line of duty deaths as well. So I think a program like this is going to be very effective. I'm talking about working with people who have anxiety, depression, PTSD, sleep disorders, self-medicating with substances, including alcohol, drugs, food, and suicides. Unfortunately, these are much too prevalent in the fire service. So we've done a great job with cancer and heart disease prevention. It's time we do the same with behavioral health issues. And I think this program with O2X's help is really going to put Boston on the map again and lead this program forward across the country. So welcome aboard, everyone, and thanks for having me here as well.
So I just want to thank Commissioner Dempsey and all the union reps for taking the time out of their busy schedule to come and present themselves at this seminar. Now, Adam Laroux, the owner and founder of the O2X program, has a great program. He's been working with the Boston Fire Department for several years with his resilience program, as well as he does a wellness with our recruits. Adam Laroux.
Just want to thank the leadership, Commissioner, just the leadership here. We've been doing with the, the all-women's workshop, this resilience seminar for wellness and everything. The Safety, Health, and Wellness Division has been an incredible partner. Local, 718, PFFM, Iaff, just incredible partners, and just thank you. And obviously you can see how leadership is here and how the emphasis now on mental health is there. I don't think it's talking about resiliency, talking about how it pertains to performance over the duration of your career is new, right? We knew this was something and a factor in all of our lives as a tactical athlete. My background, I was in the SEAL teams, was lucky enough to serve my time during a time of war, felt really appreciative of it, but we learned some very hard lessons. And I think when we first started in the SEAL community is that you put 200 people through training and you get 18 people and everybody's resilient, right? That's what we thought. But after years of combat and just finishing up on here, 21 plus years, that we learned the hard way that, something like mental health, behavioral health, we have to train that. We spend all this time on tactics, all the time, X's and O's, right? Shooting, moving, communicated, just like you guys do. Fireground tactics. You talk about, ladder placements. You're doing all sorts of training all the time. Boston, back to basics training. The tactics is something that when we talk even to, you're looking at sport teams, it's something that everybody gets, right? It's the tactics. That's what we practice, what we preach. But what about the leadership, the followership? What about the sides that's going to make us as durable as possible for the duration of our careers? And that's something that, we missed. And when we were developing a human performance program, you absolutely knew you need to include the mental health side. Because in the special operations community, or lucky enough now that we work with the fire departments, law enforcement, special operations, military units, tactical units, intelligence community, now we see this across the board. It is common. And when you sign up for these types of jobs in the tactical community, you know that you're signing up for some stress, some impact. You are signing up for a higher calling. So we understand that. But just like our bodies, we're trying to make them as durable as possible. We're trying to do that with our minds as well, right? And that's important. It's very empowering. We talk about resilience, but you're going to hear a little bit today about post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth is, if you haven't heard about it or haven't heard the term, it was coined by Dr. Robert Tedeschi down in North Carolina. It's meaning that you go through something, a challenging, traumatic event, but you emerge stronger from it. It's a pretty awesome concept that we can go through a very challenging experience and become stronger because of that. We see that across the country in the tactical community. We see that in those who lost loved ones. We've seen that in ICUs and pediatric oncology units across the board. It's something that we need to continue to train our minds just like we train the tactical side. So today we're excited to bring this program to you, and we're really excited to have the spouses here as well. Gary Alexander is going to be leading us through today. Gary is a colonel, former colonel in the special operations community, over 20 plus years in Air Force special operations, tons of combat experience, tons of leadership experience, and through his own experiences, leading others and helping through people through tough, challenging times and through a very challenging time in our country's history. He'll be telling you guys today about the breakouts, our different specialists, the sessions that we're going to have for the spouses specifically, and the one that we're going to have for the firefighters or tactical athletes. And we're going to hear some stories today and also hopefully take home some skills to make us mentally resilient and to finish our careers as strong as we started, because that's what it's all about. Everybody in this room, as I look around, hey, you guys deserve to have a long career. And when you finish it, you deserve to have a long retirement as well. Is everybody in agreement with that? You guys earned it, and so we're going to give you those skills. We're going to teach you some of the things, hopefully take away and enjoy that retirement. Be successful, healthy to your career, and enjoy the retirement. Be there for your grandkids. Be there for your families. So I want to thank you guys for being here today, and now introduce Gary Alexander.
All right, how many people have attended an O2X workshop before, previously? All right, learned a lot during it, hopefully? Okay. All right, so what you're probably going to recognize is some of these slides that I'm going to throw up here. And this is kind of to generate like what we're going to touch on today. All right, again, you know about the cardiac health, unfortunately. You know the injury risk. What strikes me is the behavioral health, which is what we're going to focus on today. All right, 48% of firefighters studied reported sleeping 6 hours or less. Every time I do a workshop, I kind of do the canvas, like, okay, who's getting, we start off at 8 hours, and then we start working our way down, and it's always 50% plus who are getting 6 hours or less on the tactical athlete side. Does that affect you? Who thinks it does not? All right, correct answer, all right? But man, that's y'all's job, unfortunately. That's the routine that you have to do. And I'm proud of you guys for doing it, because I don't know if I could do it. I did the military thing. Well, every now and then we get to get some actual good sleep. You guys are on that vicious cycle. So we've got to figure out how we can best manage that. And Dr. Ira Martin and Maria Trozi are going to talk on some things that we can do with that when we do our breakout groups. All right, so that's sleep. It induces stress. All right, next. All right, does stress noticeably affect your physical well-being? Who says yes? All right, this is one of those things where every time I kind of ask this question, pretty much everybody says yes, all right? Everybody says yes because they know it. But then, does stress noticeably affect your mental well-being? Yeah, that's the one that everybody is always concerned on. The question I like to also throw on is, does stress only affect you? No. All right, you said it emphatically, sir. Who else does it affect?
Kids, spouse.
Kids, spouse. Who else?
Friends, neighbors.
Friends, neighbors. Anybody else?
Everyone you come in contact with.
Yeah, that's pretty much the standard. That's the best answer right there. Everybody that you come into contact with, and even those that you don't sometimes come into contact with. How many people drive home and get pissed off at every single person that's driving by them because they have a bad day? All right? Yeah, a lot, okay? Again, stress affects not just you, but we try to solve the problem all by ourselves a lot of the time, even though it affects everybody else out there, okay? So those are some of the things that we're going to work on, all right? Trying to figure out, how do we relieve stress? How do we make it so that stress doesn't affect others as well? All right, again, when we do our breakout groups today, man, we're going to get into a lot more of these stress relieving techniques, okay? Because that's what's going to help us overcome this post-traumatic growth, all right? Adam talked on it very briefly. We hit resilience, all right? Resilience is, you hear the term kind of like kids are resilient, all right? What does that mean? It means like whatever you throw at them, they're going to be able to bounce back from it and be great, all right? What about adults? Are adults resilient? You can train yourself to be resilient. Somebody say no? Do you mind if I ask you just why? It's not a wrong answer. I don't mean to put you on a spot, if that's all right.
I said like sometimes.
Sometimes, okay.
I'd rather just be lazy and give up and have to deal with it.
Yeah, sometimes we'd rather be lazy and give up because it's the easy thing to do. All right, it's the easy thing to do because sometimes becoming resilient is hard. All right. Now, what about if we could become stronger after an event? all right? That's what we're going to focus on with this post-traumatic growth, all right? Becoming stronger after overcoming something or having an incident that produces, stress in your life, okay? Hunter's going to focus on that really well at the end of the day after lunch, okay? All right, excuse me. All right, so let's talk about these couple of things that I wanted to hit up to kind of set the stage for where we're going to go today so you guys can understand, like, why are we here? Why are we talking about this, okay? The career you have chosen, all right? The risk you knew about, and then the unexpected risk. What were some of the risks as a firefighter? Is everybody firefighter? Do we have any law enforcement in here? One? All right. Thanks for I'm sorry?
Proud to be amongst all of you. Thank you.
All right, good. Okay, so we've got firefighter, we got law enforcement, and we got a gentleman that's just super proud to be here with us. Social service agent, okay? All right, yes ma'am? Dispatcher, all right. Okay, so when you guys joined and you signed up to do the job that you're trying to do, what were some of the stresses, what were some of the risks that you knew about as a firefighter? We'll start off with firefighter. What are some of the risks you knew about?
Death.
Death, yep. Injury. Say it again. Heart attacks, unfortunately. Anything else? Cancer. All right. Now let's shift to what were some of the things that you have now learned, the unexpected risks that you didn't know about. Anybody got any of the unexpected risks? Depression. Suicide. Nobody joins thinking that's going to happen. How about just regular everyday stress? Sleep. We just talked about it. Sleep. Did you know when you joined the fire department or dispatch or law enforcement that your sleep schedule is going to be all jacked up? All right. You probably didn't know that. Did you know that it was going to be difficult to maintain your schedule, especially those with kids, to be able to see all of their ball games, to be able to see all their performances? All right. You're going to have to miss some of those things. Did you know all of that stuff? You knew it was going to be difficult. Right? But those are some of the unexpected risks. So the career you have chosen is very noble, but it comes with a cost. All right? So again, I'm very proud of you guys and girls for doing what you do, because you have to take it at home. Adam and I joked about it all, during one of the workshops, that in the military it's easy. You put us on an airplane. We go somewhere like to Afghanistan, Iraq, or Syria. We execute our job, and then we get back on an airplane and we come back. We've got that transition time. For some of you, that transition time could be 15, 20, 30 minutes. For some of you, maybe even shorter. That's not a lot to go from everything that you've probably experienced that day or during that 24-hour shift until you get home. And now your kid wants to play ball with you, your daughter wants you to dress up, or your wife wants you to be happy and have a nice conversation about something, or your spouse. You're like, I can't do this right now, but you do it, and that's awesome. So thank you for doing that. We're going to talk about some of those ways that we can do that, all right? So what is trauma? Does anybody want to give me it doesn't have to be a textbook or a dictionary version. What's your version of trauma? I'll pick somebody. Something that affects you mentally or physically, okay? Does it have to happen to you? No. Does it have to happen, and again, you said physically, does it physically have to hurt you? Absolutely. A lot of it could be mental. A lot of the stuff that I've experienced has been physical trauma, all right? I'll watch my kid fall down and hurt themselves, and I'm like, man, that affects me mentally, all right? My wife, on the other hand, she gets affected, like with kids all the time, mentally, because if they get anywhere near the road, she's already having like a heart attack, okay, because she doesn't want them to get run over. All right, so trauma is very, physically, I like that definition. It's physically or mentally. Does it have to be multiple events? Does it have to be one event? Yeah, it can be one event, it can be multiple events, it can be pretty much anything that's out there, because it's going to affect different people different ways, all right? So somebody might get affected by what happened on your shift that day, whereas somebody else may have zero effect from it. Somebody might get affected physically. Somebody might get affected mentally. It's one of those things like you don't know because everybody's going to react to it a little bit differently. All right? I mean, the spouses, let's see what the spouse is. All right? How many of you guys collectively, or girls, collectively, your tactical athlete, your fireman, your law enforcement person has an event and you come home and then you're affected by what they tell you? Does that ever happen? I used to tell my wife some of the things. I'm like, finally, you want to know what's going on? Here's what's going on. And she would just sit there and just kind of like shake her head, and she's, you know, emotionally distraught. She didn't go through the event, but she now feels for me for having gone through the event, okay? So again, trauma doesn't have to be physical. It doesn't have to be mental. It's a combination of both, but it's going to affect you, all right? And it's going to affect those others around you. All right, it adds up. I'm going to give you a quick little narrative, a quick little story on the next slide of like some things that I experienced about how it adds up, okay? All right, so I joined the Air Force, got commissioned in 1999, after all of my training, got to my first duty station in January of 2001. So 9 months later, Afghanistan happens. Man, I'm stoked. I'm excited. Because now we have a defined enemy, somebody that we're going to go after. Obviously, I'm very sad about the events that happened. But now, man, as my job, all the training and everything that I've gone through, I get to finally go do this stuff, okay? All right. Think that might have been stressful? Probably. Didn't recognize it at the time, though. All right. Immediately, Operation Anaconda happens. Knew several guys that were, you know, personally, that were lost on that mission. All right, we have a fallen memorial. I go up to Fort Campbell, Kentucky for that. Man, it's a very trying and emotional thing. It's just part of the job. Just part of the job. We knew we were going to lose some people. Like those were some of the risks that we knew were going to be associated with it. All right, Operation Red Wings, lost a helicopter carrying a whole bunch of Navy SEALs, trying to rescue some other SEALs. June 28th. 2005. It's also my birthday. So I'm in Afghanistan during this time, and on my birthday is when I start learning about this. And so now, like my birthday, now I associate this with my birthday. Stress? Possibly. All right, I'm in Afghanistan again another time, and I'm sitting in this vehicle when an IED goes off. Part of the job. We knew we were over there. IEDs are all over the place. No big deal. Get back on it, continue the mission, keep going. All right, August 6, 2011, extortion flight. Unfortunately, lost another helicopter, lost a whole bunch of other special operations personnel. Again, knew a lot of these, was in Afghanistan when this happened as well. You know, personally had to carry some of the caskets onto the aircraft. Was very proud to have been there and done that during the moment. Would never, ever, ever want to do that again. That's when I started to realize, hey, some things are, man, this is hard, okay? This is hard. All these pictured up here are all the special operations, Air Force special operations guys who have been killed in combat up until about 2 years ago. It wasn't until this gentleman here at the bottom went down here to his funeral, to his memorial service down at Colbert Field when I was living in Georgia at the time. I was commander leading 100 and some odd people, had to be stoic all the time. Nothing affects me. I'm married, got 2 kids, alpha male. Nothing affects me. Came back home, saw my wife. She said, "How did it go?" I looked at her. I couldn't even get one word out before I just started crying. And I couldn't stop. I could not stop crying for the next 15 minutes because all of these things had finally caught up to me. And that's when I realized I got some issues. Not bad issues, but man, I'm carrying on a couple of things that I probably need to deal with, okay? Anybody ever felt that way? And it doesn't need to be a show of hands, all right? Thank you, sir. All right, you guys and girls do so much throughout your time, fire department, law enforcement, dispatch, that you don't even realize everything that starts to add up, okay? Those are the things that I want you to take a step back. At the end of today, on your drive back, think about those things and go, wow, I really have taken on a lot. Because if you think about it right now, today, even during this workshop, that's how much more value you're going to get out of this post-traumatic talk today, okay? So again, man, I told my wife, I was like, I need to start seeing somebody. I need to go talk to somebody. And she's like, well, just go talk with one of your friends at first. I was like, okay, I'll do that. So I just started talking to one of my buddies. Finally, he was like, yeah, man, I got really messed up when he was with me in Afghanistan when we had to do that. He's like, man, that was terrible. I was like, all right, man, cool. I never knew it affected you like that. So all of a sudden, this wall is down between us, and we can talk about it. All right, talked to some other buddies about some of the guys that we had lost that I knew personally. Like, oh man, yeah, that was really bad. Like, oh yeah, you were affected by that too. Oh man, cool. It's nice to be able to talk to you. So one of the things I'm trying to force on you is once you start talking about it, once you kind of break down that wall, man, it becomes a lot easier to do it. So whether you're breaking down that wall with your spouse, man, and it took me just literally breaking down. My wife had never seen me cry before up until that moment. All right. We'd been married for 7 years at that point. She'd never seen me cry. And she still remembers, like she can tell you in detail, like what she was wearing, what I was wearing, where I was sitting on the couch and all that stuff. Like that's how much it like affected her. So again, we talk about that stress and you said, who does it affect? Everybody you come into contact with, okay? All right, so then I get into, start talking with people, start getting into this, I get another job, and then I have one of the worst leaders that I've ever encountered in a 20-year military career. And he was like the definition of toxic leadership, if you are familiar with that term. And I start losing sleep. Like I literally am having problems sleeping because I'm like, this person is driving me wild. Like I'm addressing all these other issues from all these other things, but now I'm not sleeping, all right? So fast forward, got out of the military, finally started trying to seek help for it. It took some while, took some trial, took some error, but I just finished up a 8-week program working with a psychologist on ways to try and improve my sleep, all right? Again, it took work on my part and it was not fun, but I'm glad I did it. My wife's glad I did it. My kids are glad I did it because now I've got energy. Now I'm not irritable. Now I'm not anything. So again, it's one of those things where, all right, man, I got to initiate it because nobody else is going to do it, okay? So you got to make sure that you do it because it adds up, all right? Everybody still tracking on this? All right. Everybody, is it making sense so far? Okay. All right, I promise I'm not going to start ending on Debbie Downer stuff, all right? All right, so where I failed. Where I failed on this was I didn't recognize the signs, the symptoms. Now, I will also say, back in the mid 2000 teens, you weren't allowed to be affected in special operations in the military. Man, Afghanistan, Iraq, all that stuff, that was just stuff that you had to go do, all right? It's just, hey, just stuff you got to do. Sound familiar? Sound like what you guys have to do? All right. It took about 10 years of constant combat deployments for everybody, not just special operations, before people, smart people, doctors started saying, maybe we are putting a lot on these people. Maybe we're putting a lot on them by separating them from their families, having them go execute their job, and then come home. Maybe we're putting a lot on the fire department, the law enforcement, by having them go on these shifts and do everything that they do every single day. All right? Again, your leadership, as evidence of them standing up here saying mental health, mental health, mental health, recognizes that it's okay. And that's where I want you to be with it. It's okay. I am fine and dandy with saying, does anybody mind if I cuss real quick? Sorry, I will not do it because it's being recorded. I was effed up in the head, all right? And I don't mean it like I was so messed up. I was driving to the bottle. I was doing everything. Man, but I had issues and I needed to resolve them, okay? So it's okay to not be okay, all right? For you alpha males out there, man, it's okay. I promise you. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to, if you're sitting around your fire station dinner table, to say, hey man, I was really affected by that call that we went out on today. I'll guarantee you, if you do that, somebody else is going to agree with you or somebody else is going to want to talk to you about something else that affected them. So it's okay to not be okay, is where I want to leave you with, all right? That's where I failed. I didn't recognize that. All right, so what I've learned is, one, a lot about myself, but there are assets and people out there who really care about you. They care about you so much because you can't mass produce or quickly produce this audience right here tomorrow. It takes years, if not decades, all right? So people have a vested interest in you, not just as a resource, but as a human being. They want to see you succeed, all right? So please recognize that's the biggest thing that I've learned is there are so many assets out there for people to take charge of. Again, a lot of those are in the blue folder if you're unfamiliar with them. But you've got to speak up, all right? You got to speak because, man, if you just sit there, then it's not going to lead you to the results that you want, okay? So please do that. That's what I've learned. I've also learned to communicate a lot more. Again, I told you I called some of my buddies and started saying, hey, these things affected me. Man, those are some of the things that I've learned, okay? All right, the nasty 4-letter word. Anybody know what it is? No. That's sometimes one of them, especially for guys, all right? Help. Nasty 4-letter word. A lot of people don't like to say the word help. All right, so I try to relate it to a couple stories. So how many people, if somebody calls you up and says, hey man, I need you to help come move a couch from my living room to my new house, how many people are going to, by a show of hands, how many people are going to go help? Probably just about everybody. All right, same scenario. How many people are going to be the one to call up their buddy and say, will you give me help?
Could you repeat that question?
All right. So how many people are going to call their buddies and ask for help moving the couch? It's your couch now. You have to move it. How many people are going to call up and say, hey, I need help moving my couch? Maybe I'm confusing people, but it's not as many. We will give help all day long. We'll give it until we're blue in the face. We'll give it until it's 2 o'clock in the morning. We'll give it to the point of where it's inconvenient for us and our family. But us asking for help, it's like, no, I can't do that. I can't put somebody out. Trust me, everybody, you saw it, pretty much everybody in here raised their hand and said, I will give help. But asking for help, it's like one of those things, we're just afraid to do it. So the reason I do it, I wanted you to see by a show of hands, was everybody's willing to give you the help, so don't be afraid to ask for the help. So that's the nasty 4-letter word, all right? The nasty 4-letter word is help. Man, say it. Say help, okay? Because there are tons of people out here that want to help you. All right, the final thing that I'm gonna start leaving you with before we start moving in is moving forward, especially for me. One of the things I think the best helped me out throughout my entire military career was find your why. Anybody ever heard that before? You know, finding your why. You know, find your why you're doing what you're doing. Find the why behind why you want to be a fire department, a law enforcement. Find the why you want to be anything. You want to be successful. What is your why? Maybe it's for your kids, maybe it's for your grandkids, maybe it's because you want to get promoted, maybe you want to be a chief, maybe you just want to serve the community. But find your why, okay? Because if you can find your why, it helps you get to that every single day when you wake up. I'll give you some of my examples. You know, when I was single and I was in the military, my why was, man, I wanted to serve my country. That's all I wanted to do. It's like, that's all I want to do, just serve my country. I want to jump out of airplanes. I want to do all this stuff, but ultimately it comes back to, I just want to serve my country. All right, then I got married. I was like, man, I want to make my wife proud. That's what got me out of bed. I was like, I want my wife to be proud of me. And then I started having kids, and I was like, man, I want my kids to be proud of me. Like, that's it. Like, that's my why. Every single day I would start thinking about that. So for those of you who may have heard about Find Your Why, make sure that you find your why, and it can change. That's the other thing I want you to understand is it can change, all right? But if you don't have your why, if you don't figure out what your why is for whatever you're doing, man, it makes it difficult, okay? Especially when it comes to overcoming a tragic event or making yourself ready. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, great, sir, thank you. All right, so what I've learned is this dude, that's my son. All right, took him go-karting for the first time, man. All right, that's my why. Like that joy on his face when I took him there, like that's worth everything that I've done. That's worth my 20 plus years of military to have that right there. Okay, that's worth, you know, anything and everything that I have to do, waking up early, going to bed late, decorating, you know, all of those stuff. That's my why. That's my little girl. All right, that was just this past Halloween. She's my Wonder Woman, man. Again, I can't look at that picture and not get like dreamy and teary-eyed. I'm like, God, you know. So that's my why. And then you put them together. All right, man. Y'all don't have Waffle House up here, do you? Yeah, I took them to Waffle House last weekend for the first time in a year and a half, and that was the reaction they gave me, okay? So that's my why. Again, that's my constant reminder of, hey, whatever challenges get thrown in front of me, not only am I going to be resilient about it, but I'm going to make myself better. I'm going to come out on the other side because these dudes. Now, I love my wife, absolutely. You know, she drives, you know, everything in the house. She makes sure that everything is going well. So she's part of my why too. But at the end of the day, like, my wife can figure stuff out on her own. These kids can't figure out stuff on their own. So I have to be there. So that's my why. That's my personal story on.
Says my name is Hunter Barnhill. I go by Scotch, and you can thank the 20th Bomb Squadron from Markston Air Force Base for that. It's a long story. I'll just leave it at that. A little bit about me. I grew up in the great state of Ohio, oldest of three. Smoking hot wife, Crystal, up there. You can see my little guy, Nolan. He's now 6 years old. From a very young age, I have always had a passion for aviation, and we're going to talk about that in a little while. Super average student in high school. I went down to Florida, specifically Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, for college. And I didn't go there because it's Florida, for the sun and the beaches. The reason I went down there was because at the time, Embry-Riddle was producing the most pilot candidates than any other school. Aside from the service academies, of course, the Air Force Academy puts out more pilot candidates. But of all the private and civilian public universities out there, Embry-Riddle was pushing out more pilot candidates. So I went to Embry-Riddle seeing that as my ticket to get a pilot slot, to achieve my childhood dream. So I went down there, and I've never been a really good student. Kind of always average, you know, C's get degrees, right? But I loved ROTC. ROTC was my jam. I excelled in it really well. So when it came time to get my assignment, fall semester of my senior year, I got my dream. I was going to be going to pilot training. As long as everything checked out medically, I was going to be getting my dream and going to UPT or undergraduate pilot training. So December of 2009, commissioned, graduated. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that that same day that I graduated and commissioned, I proposed to my now wife. So by the spring of 2010, I went to, it's called Columbus Air Force Base down in Mississippi, and that's where I attended UPT pilot training. A little bit about pilot training. Pilot training is a three-phase program. Phase one is all academics. So learn everything about propulsion, engines, fuel systems, hydraulics, regulations, both civil and military regulations. That's phase one. Phase two, bottom right-hand corner there, that is what's called a T6 Texan 2. So phase two, you hit the flight line. You actually get to fly a real airplane. Once you get done with that, that's about an 8-month phase. So phase three is where you break up into different tracks. For those of us that want to go fly fighters and bombers, you track the T-38, which you see up there in the top left-hand corner. If you want to go fly tankers or heavies, cargo, you fly a T-1 Jayhawk, which looks like a Learjet, if you can imagine, if you know what that is. It's like a business jet looking thing. And then for those lieutenants that want to go fly helicopters, we actually send those guys down to train with the Army at Fort Rucker. I wanted to fly A-10s. I wanted to be the close air support guru. That is the plane that the Air Force actually took a gun and built an aircraft around it. And that was my jam. I wanted to go put warheads on foreheads. I wanted to go support our guys on the ground. So obviously I competed for and successfully tracked to the T-38. Had a really good time flying the T-38. But assignment night, this is the night that you actually get your assigned aircraft. And the Air Force kind of does this up, you know, you go to the O Club, the Officers Club, and they stand you up, they have something like this where there's a projector behind you and there's a chair up on a stage, and you go up there, you get roasted by your fellow compatriots and your fellow, you know, those who you go through UPT with. And then, bam, they pop up the aircraft that you are going to be assigned to. Because guess what? It doesn't come down to what you want. It all comes down to the needs of the Air Force, right? And for whatever reason, at the time that I finished UPT, the Air Force needed more bomber pilots. So there I went, walked up to the stage, sat down, fully expecting an A-10 to pop up on the screen behind me. And guess what popped up? The B-52. It was a shock. I was a little disappointed, not going to lie. But I went into that assignment with an open mind. And as it turns out, absolutely loved my time to B-52. If I could go back, I would actually kind of consider helicopters maybe a little bit more, but I would choose the B-52. The reason being, the aircraft is a crew aircraft. The A-10 is a single-seater. A crew aircraft, you need to practice leadership. You know, you've got a combat crew, and a B-52 is an aircraft commander, a co-pilot, an electronic warfare officer. We call him the defense of the aircraft. And then you've got a radar navigator, who's more or less a bombardier, and a navigator. They are together, they are considered the offense of the aircraft. The EDUB, the defense, wants to take the aircraft away from the targets. Because guess what? The enemy's not, they know a thing or two. They know what we want to schwack. You know, they know what we want to destroy. And so they co-locate their defenses by those targets. The EDUB jams the signals of the missiles that they shoot out to destroy aircraft, to shoot us down. So the defense wants to take us away from the target, 9 times out of 10. The offense, their job is to hit that pickle button, to release that bomb, to destroy that target. So they want to take us to the target. The aircraft commander, the co-pilot, where they make their money, they solve the tactical problem. They take what the EDUB is saying, and they take what the navigators are saying. So they fly the aircraft, drive the bus, as they call us, just bus drivers. So we fly the aircraft, ingress in a way that we survive. We get the aircraft into a position that the offense can release the bomb, and then we egress in a way that we can survive too. So for that reason, I really enjoyed my time in the B-52. Down at Barksdale. Barksdale Air Force Base is where I was assigned to the 20th Bomb Squadron. The other reason too is, you know, Crystal and I, we had our first child there, Nolan. So we had built and established some deep roots in Shreveport. But one day, while I was flying the B-52, my commander came to me and said, "Hey, Scotch, I've got this assignment that I need to fill. It's as a T-6 instructor pilot back at Columbus Air Force Base, where it all started for me. Would you like it?" Heck yes, I would like it. So before we knew it, we're back in Columbus Air Force Base. I'm teaching, so the bottom right-hand picture again, that's the T-6. The reason I love flying the T-6, it's a very rewarding job. You're basically tasked with taking a student pilot, a lieutenant who is not yet a winged pilot, who is a pedestrian. They may have a couple flight hours, or you even get guys, a couple guys who are airline pilots who have thousands of hours. And by the time that they graduate phase 2 or finish T-6s, they are capable of flying and employing an aircraft in highly dynamic, complex situations. Flying formation with 10 feet of wingtip spacing, doing instrument approaches, flying in clouds with no visual references. So you are basically building the foundation of their entire aviation career as T6 instructor pilots. And oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, it is very fun. It is like a modern day P-51. Flying the B-52, we didn't really get to go land, go see the world, because when you're a nuclear bomber, other countries don't really like you landing in their country for obvious reasons. But the T6, it is a cloud-chasing machine. You get to go to cross countries. You could get to fly to different airports, fly once every single day, if not twice. In the B-52, you were lucky if you flew 4 times a month. And flying was my goal all the time. And here's why. Here's why aviation was always a passion of mine. This is why, to me, being a pilot in the Air Force was not a matter of if, it was a matter of when. It all started with my great-grandfather, top left-hand corner there. That is Colonel Clarence Dana Barnhill. He flew bombers in World War I, when the bombers were made nothing more of wood, fabric, and wires. Of note, he actually learned how to fly Caproni, which was the name of his bomber, from an Italian that didn't speak a lick of English. So he had to learn how to fly using hand signals and, you know, the instructor tapping him on the shoulder, left shoulder, turn left, right shoulder, turn right. Then right below him is my mom's dad. That's my grandfather. He taught me how to fly. So he actually gave me my private pilot's license and enabled me to solo an aircraft before I drove a car by myself. My uncle, Uncle Tex, down there you see his hero shot on the T-38. He went on to fly KC-135s. My brother Logan, he is kind of the black sheep of the family. He went off to fly helicopters in the Army. He flew OH-58, which is a Kiowa. It is a now retired helicopter. Now he flies Apaches. So as you can see, it's in my blood. April 16th, 2017, for you calendar prodigies, this was Easter Sunday of 2017. On this particular day, Crystal and I, we were assigned to Columbus Air Force Base. I was a T6 instructor pilot on this day. I was about a year and a half into my assignment there. Easter Sunday, obviously Nolan was a kid. We invited some family friends over, had an Easter egg hunt with their kids and families as well, enjoyed some lunch. I remember finishing the egg hunt, and as we walked back into my backyard, out of nowhere, I had a seizure. Didn't have any indication of why I had the seizure or that something neurological was going on with me. From what I'm told, the seizure lasted about 45 seconds to a minute. I maintained consciousness. The right side of my body just locked up and started the rhythmic motions. Came out of the seizure, and we didn't want to be rude hosts, so we finished the party. Cleaned up, did the dishes, which looking back now was not the right thing to do. But after that, after we cleaned up and the guests left, I went upstairs to my office, hopped on the computer, and started reading what's called the Aeromedical Waiver Guide. I was not concerned with what was going on inside of my body or my brain. I was not concerned with whether or not there was something very medically wrong with me. I was concerned whether or not I would be able to keep flying. Because the Aeromedical Waiver Guide is a document that lists a number of different conditions that are waiverable, that you can continue to fly with these listed conditions. So I spent a lot of time in the Aeromedical Waiver Guide this evening, the evening of April 16th, 2017. And I didn't really find any answers, at least what I was looking for. So I remember calling it a night, walking back into my bedroom, started brushing my teeth. My wife, Crystal, standing there right next to me. And I remember saying to her very vividly, Crystal, I think there's always going to be a 100 Barnhill before the seizure and a 100 Barnhill after the seizure. And I did not expect how true that statement would be. So obviously this was a Sunday. The next day was a Monday. I was scheduled, thankfully I was not on the flying schedule. I knew that it would not be safe for me to go fly solo or with a worse yet, a student, until we got some answers. We had figured out what was going wrong. So I was thankfully assigned an administrative job. I was the operations supervisor that Monday. And the operations supervisor is a guy that you check in with before you step to fly, before you go out and fly a training mission or training sorties, we call them. The ops supervisor assigns you your tail number. He kind of goes over the weather again. He collects your operational risk management sheets. So, administrative job. But I got done with the ops soup tour, and I knew that I had to say something to the flight doc. And it just so happened that day that the flight doc, I'll never forget, his name was Kenneth Taylor. He went by Doogie. If anybody's seen the show Doogie Howser, he looked like he was a brilliant flight doc, but he legitimately looked like he was 12 years old. So I passed him the hallway and said, "Hey Doogie, I gotta talk to you, man. Can you come into my office?" He's like, "Yeah, what's up?" Like, I have the worst headache of my life. I did not want to come out and say I had a seizure yesterday, because I knew that right there would be the end of my flying career. So I said the one thing that I knew would get him to send me downtown to get further testing and evaluation. And it worked like a charm. So he said, "Okay, copy that. Worst headache for your life. Obviously an anomaly, significant. Go downtown to the clinic in Columbus, Mississippi, and they'll check you out. They'll give you further examination, do some tests. We'll figure out what's going on. Don't you worry." So I went down to the clinic, and the only reason Columbus, Mississippi is on the map is because of the Air Force base there. The place to be on a Friday night is the Walmart. So you can kind of imagine what their medical clinic, what kind of resources their medical clinic has. Not many. But I went down to the clinic. They gave me a CT scan. They saw something like, "Yeah, we see something on the CT scan. Well, you need to come back in here for an MRI." This is what they found. That is not what a healthy brain looks like. I remember the radiologist that was looking at this image here. He called me out of the examination room, and said, "I want you to show you something." So I was looking over his shoulder. He's like, again, this is not, he put things in layman's terms, this is not what a healthy brain looks like. And before we can come up with a plan of action, you need to go get more information from UAB, University of Alabama in Birmingham. They've got the neuro-oncology, they've got the neurosurgery departments there. They will tell you what needs to happen. So I said, "Cool, no problem." So I went home. The next day, this was the Monday. I didn't even have my wife with me. I was in my flight suit. This was Monday still. We went to the clinic. Immediately, fight or flight reaction. Fight. This is just a bump in the road. This is just a small setback. We're going to get through this. I'm going to get back to flying. I'm going to get back to being a father and a husband. This is not going to be a big deal at all. Fast forward 2 weeks later, I'm under the knife, having left frontal lobe awake craniotomy with brain mapping at UAB. Brain surgery. And the procedure was they cut open my scalp, they removed the piece of my skull, and they proceeded to zap different parts of my brain with a little electrode. And that was the surgeons finding where they could cut and where they couldn't cut. So I remember lying on the table like awake. I remember like it was yesterday. My right arm, left leg, just twitching randomly. They couldn't use narcotics because that would interfere with the brain signals and would skew the results of where they could cut and where they couldn't cut. The actual worst, I remember the pain. It was a dull pain of them cutting into my brain. It wasn't that bad. It was just kind of uncomfortable. Yeah, actually, the worst part of the entire ordeal was when they stitched me back up, when they had to put in staples. The anesthesia, after they got the tumor out, which is about the size of a kiwi, the anesthesia wore off. And I could feel them pressing those staples into my skull, and that was by far the worst part. Fight or flight. For me, there was no question. It was going to be fight. So I kind of adopted this fights on mantra. And it turned into a bumper sticker. It got fire. Like, it was like a wildfire. Spread throughout my squadron. They made T-shirts, hats, bumper stickers, little patches, all with fights on scotch. So my squadron was an incredible source of support. And they rallied. You know, when you're a small town like Columbus, you don't have, you know, other things to go do. It's not like you can go into the city, go see a site. You have your squadron. You have your bros. And that's all you do have. So there was no choice. They didn't have any choice. They insulated me. They didn't isolate. And I decided for myself, you know, I'm going to, like I said, I've got no choice here. I'm going to attack this problem like the sailors, Marines did on Normandy, D-Day. So the bottom left-hand picture there is D-Day. That's a soldier with a mohawk. So I actually was rolled into the operating room with a mohawk just to emulate, hey, this is the mindset. This is the approach. This is how I'm going to tackle this problem. And I wanted there to be no doubt. Not for my family, for my squadron, for my friends. I wanted there to be no doubt that I was going into this hard charging. All right, so this is the result of a 8-hour brain surgery. You could see the cavity. You could see the void of the tumor. That tumor that was the size of a kiwi. There's nothing there. It's just an empty hole that is filled with spinal fluid right now. Recovery was not as easy as I was expecting it to be. I thought, again, this was just going to be a minor bump in the road, that I was going to be able to get through this surgery, through treatment, and get back to flying, get back to what I was doing. That was not the case. The procedure ended, they got the tumor out, spent a day or two in the hospital. The day after I was discharged, I had 4 grand mal seizures, completely unconscious, which landed me back in the hospital. And that is really the point in time where I'm like, no, this can't be happening. Not me. Not now, not this way. I mean, who gets a brain tumor? Nobody thinks it can happen to them until it happens to them. That was me. The other thing, too, the tumor was located in a very important part of your brain. I know the brain is very important as a whole, but it was located right up against what's called the primary motor strip of the brain. Primary motor strip is what controls all your major muscle movements, control of your arms and your legs. It also controls your speech, word generation. So because the tumor was on the left side of my brain, when I woke up, I was paralyzed on the right side of my body. Completely couldn't move my arm or my right leg. The other thing, too, and this was more frustrating. This was the most frustrating part of the entire ordeal. I couldn't speak. All I could voice was something that resembled yes and roughly a no. And the most I will never forget this. There was a time where I was laying in the ICU bed and I was really thirsty. I couldn't tell my wife, hey, I'm thirsty. Can you give me a glass of water? And all I did was saying those words, those sounds over and over again, hoping that she could pick up, hoping that she would pick up on the fact that my voice is getting crackly. That, okay, his voice is dry. Maybe I should get him some water. It didn't work. But after 3 months of physical and speech therapy, I gained most of it all back. Still have some difficulty with word finding, especially when I get flustered or stressed out. But after 3 months of physical and speech therapy, I regained about 90% of my baseline. Ooh, those pictures are difficult to see. What you see right there is a picture of me being discharged from the hospital. And you can see the scar on the top of my head. That there is a picture of a shell of a man. I don't think I would be here standing in front of you today if I didn't have my friends, my family, and my faith. And 3 or 4 specific verses that kept me going, kept that ember burning inside. It was that ember that eventually was fanned from the help of family and friends and some different resilience strategies and tactics that we're going to talk about here in a little while. That ember grew into a flame, which grew into a fire, which gave me the ability to bounce back stronger and better. And I'm not here to tell you that all of my problems have been solved, that I'm no longer impervious or susceptible to setbacks. No, that's not it at all. Since this, let's see, going through some fertility issues due to treatment. I have been diagnosed with ocular histoplasmosis. It's mold spores in the back of my retina causing blind spots. So I've got some vision issues too. I was diagnosed with PTSD, hypervigilance, because those seizures really messed me up. Really messed me up. But I bounced back, and I'm here standing here in front of you today. Notably, I was still in the Air Force, so I was enrolled in what's called the Air Force Wounded Warrior Program, not to be confused with the Wounded Warrior Project. That you get blankets from Trace Atkins if you donate. But that allowed me to be involved in their ambassador program. So this gave me the opportunity to travel around to different Air Force bases and tell my story, to encourage other airmen. I also got involved in their adaptive sports program. So I was actually I competed and made it to the Department of Defense Wounded Warrior Games in 2018. I competed in cycling, shooting, and rowing. I received medals in rowing and shooting. Now, I would never unfortunately return to flying again. But I found a workaround. Paramotor is considered light sport aviation. And therefore, you don't need any medical requirements to go do that. So that's how I get my fix of aviation these days, is I go fly a paramotor. And that thing is a blast. I didn't know you could do that. It's just like strapping on a 2-stroke lawnmower in the back, and you get a bed sheet over the top of you, and you can climb all the way to 17,000 feet with that thing, as long as you stay in Class E and G airspace or around more or less away from crowded airports. You can do whatever you want. Little did I know that's real flying. That's real flying. And then up there, you just see me and my family. We're just living life, carrying on. But again, I despite all these rebounds and all these successes, I don't want to give off the perception that I've got this figured out. Okay. So anybody has any questions for me and my story? Are there any? I was empty inside. I did not, like I said, I didn't think I thought that I would rebound. This would be just a minor hiccup, a minor bump in the road. And that picture that I showed up there, that was me after I had realized that this was not going to be as easy of a recovery as I had expected it to be. And that right there was a picture of me I didn't have the best confidence. I was not as resilient as I thought I was. Now, mind you, the Air Force had, I had received a lot of training through the Air Force when it comes to resilience. I was what's called an MRT, Master Resilience Trainer. So I had learned a thing or two about resilience. But it's one thing to attend a bunch of workshops and classes in resilience. It's a totally other thing to actually have to put them and apply them to your daily life. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. It took a while, and I can't really pinpoint one moment in time or one event. It was a steady, stair-stepped approach of making progress. After I got home from the surgery, I just sat on my couch for 2 months, shades drawn, just looking at the TV, not watching the TV, just looking at it, and counting down the minutes and seconds that I would be able to take my next dosage of anti-seizure medication, because I feared having another seizure. And I'll say this too, my commander, my DO at the time, they wanted to see me, but I didn't want to see them. Think about it, Easter Sunday, that previous Friday, I flew twice a day. And I remember my last flight on that Friday. It was with a student. We flew to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and we did 3 instrument approaches. And then when we recovered into a military operating area, and the student was already signed off and everything, I took the aircraft and just did some cloud chasing. 2 weeks later, I'm paralyzed. So I went from being this tip of the spear Air Force pilot to being this shell of a man, this paralyzed guy that can't even speak, let alone walk up a stairs by himself, a flight of stairs by himself. But to your point, sir, it was the persistence. It was the persistence of my family and my squadron commanders, and even the wing commander. I'll never forget that my wing commander came over one night, dropped off a meal, and he said something that will stick with me the rest of my life. He said, "Scotch, you've got to learn to accept blessings. And if you do, you allow all boats to rise." And that is so true. Like, when you open up to receive, you open up to give. And you give other people the satisfaction of being able to help you, and you get the help. I thought at that point in time that I didn't need any help. I'm going to be doing this myself. I'm good to go. But it just took time. It just took time, and, fanning that flame, my faith grew. I was memorizing more scripture verses, which had a twofold benefit. The actual act of memorizing scripture verses fed my soul. But it also exercised my brain. So it's just little things like that. Getting back into the gym. I remember the first day, the first time I went back into the gym after my brain surgery, I love to do rowing. And the only thing I could do was 100 meters on the rowing machine. I was very pissed. That's all I could do. But looking back, that was a start, and there's a Bible verse, who shall despise the day of small beginnings? Don't despise those days. Don't hate on those baby steps, because everybody's got to start from somewhere. The other thing too, So the brain surgery happened in April. The June, July time frame was just a blur. I was like a time machine. Wasn't all there mentally. But by November, I had attended my first Wounded Warrior care event, in which I ran a lap around the track. So when you think about that, November, I guess, was really to your question, sir, that November was the time frame where I think I can do this. I think I'm back on track here. And it took my care manager, he had to basically twist my arm for me to sign up for this thing. And if he hadn't done that, I don't think that would have happened. I don't think I would have ran that one lap around the track or got my start in adaptive sports. Now, I'll say this too, that I forgot to talk about. They tried to medically retire me that same year, 2017. I'm like, you guys going to try and retire me the same year within 4 months of me having brain surgery? I mean, I'm not all there. I'm not as sharp as a tack. Like, I can't even navigate this very elaborate and complex system. How are you guys going to do this? Are you guys just going to give me the boot? No, this was my boyhood. This is my lifelong dream to be in the Air Force. I'm not going on your terms. I'm going on my terms. Everybody said, Scotch, you got to just accept the medical retirement. I'm like, with all due respect, screw you. I'm going on my terms. So I was successfully returned to duty. However, like I said, I would never fly again in the Air Force. Instead, I was sent to Ohio State to teach ROTC, which was actually a very fulfilling and rewarding job. It was a lot like being an instructor pilot. But I went from instructing in a very specific skill set to instructing on a wide skill set. I was kind of like acting as a life coach to college kids. And they're kids. I thought I was old when I went to college. When I went back to Ohio State, they're just kids. And you've got many opportunities to mentor them, put them on the right track. It was a really rewarding job. But it was while I was at Ohio State that we ended up, I'm from Ohio. My wife and I had come to the conclusion that it was time to step back and accept the medical retirement. They were offering us full health benefits and military retirement benefits. So we accepted the medical retirement while I was at Ohio State. Crystal is my hero. She, the months after, immediately following the diagnosis and the surgery, she was my rock. She was all I had every day. But as the dust began to settle, she actually developed her own health anxieties, and even got to a point that I said, "Hey, you need to think about getting a therapist yourself." So it took a toll. She was a victim herself, not just me. And I have come to the conclusions that people like me who get diagnosed and have to undergo very traumatic experiences, all we have to do is survive. It's the people closest to us that have to watch us in those scenarios, in those circumstances. That she had to watch me lose my ability to use my right hand, my right leg. She had to watch me lose the ability to walk. She had to watch me lose the ability to talk. At the time, Nolan was like 2 years old. So she went from being a mother of a 2-year-old and a 31-year-old adult that could function as a 31-year-old adult to basically the mother of a 2-year-old and another 2-year-old that looked like a 31-year-old man with the same needs. So she just got, boom. Her plate got full really fast. But she's doing great now. Any other questions? Love the dialogue. Love the questions. Yes. Exodus 14:14. Now, I'm not here to proselytize. I'm not here to convert anybody. But since you asked, ma'am, Exodus 14:14, the Lord will fight for you. You only need to be still. Which worked out pretty well because I couldn't move my right side of my body. I had no choice but to be still on the right side of my body. The other one was 2 Chronicles 20:15. Do not be afraid of this huge army, because the battle's not yours. It is the Lord's. As a passenger now, well, honestly, every pilot, whenever they're flying an airliner, they secretly hope that the pilot has a heart attack and they have to jump in and save the day. That's still me. But I've accepted it. I've accepted that the Lord had different plans for me, and has closed the door for that. And that's my new, like I said, paramotor is my new way of scratching that itch. I still have a passion for aviation, but I am not an aviator anymore. And I mean, to your point, it's just something I've had to accept. And it has not been easy. I still think about flying every single day, but I'm on a different path now. And I have to have faith that the path that I'm on is a better path. I'm doing something more important, more enjoyable than flying, which is a tall order. Yeah.
Do you still use that fights on mantra as part of this, or did that change throughout your recovery?
No, it's still fights on. It's fights on every single day. Like I said, the setbacks have not stopped. And if anything good, I mean, I'm to the point that I now consider brain cancer a blessing for a number of different reasons, for another small reasons, but a big reason was because that I applied. I came up with that mantra and I applied it in a very serious manner. I wrote that on my heart. I wrote that on my soul. And in anything, the ocular histoplasmosis, the fertility issues that I'm going through, I forgot this too. A big setback was last year. So after I went through, had the tumor removed, they didn't do chemo, they didn't do radiation. All they did was, hey, come back, you need to get MRIs every 4 months. Okay? At the time, the doctors said and thought that chemo and radiation would do more harm than good. So I went in for a routine MRI last year, and the scans showed that the tumor had returned. The cancer had returned. And all the tumor boards, University of Cincinnati, Ohio State, which is where I'm receiving my primary care right now, and UAB, all their tumor boards said, yep, you need another brain surgery. I was not a fan. You guys have already taken a lot of brain tissue away, all right? Let's just hold our horses here. But unfortunately, it was looking like that's what was going to have to happen. In the 11th hour, after I've done all the pre-surgery screening and done all the prep stuff, I mean, we moved the bed downstairs so I wouldn't have to climb upstairs. We did everything. But in the 11th hour, I think it was the Ohio State, or UAB, University of Alabama, Birmingham, their tumor board called me up, hey, you've got a very specific genetic mutation, which makes you a candidate for this clinical trial that is actually going on at the James Cancer Center. I'm like, so would this mean that I would not have to have brain surgery? Yep. Sign me up. So I've been going through, this December will be the 1-year mark of the clinical trial. All I have to do is take 4 tabs, 10 milligram tabs of it's either a placebo, it's a double-blind trial, so it's either a placebo or the actual drug. Take 4 tabs of those a night. And the first day I was enrolled in the clinical trial, I went in the clinic, I took the medication, we had an hour drive back to about an hour and change from Columbus, Ohio to Dayton, Ohio. As soon as I was getting out of the van and unloading the stuff, I had a seizure again. And then the next morning, I was going downstairs, so after waking up in the morning, got myself a glass of water, had another seizure. So that leads me to a fairly significant, good degree of confidence I'm actually receiving the medication and not the placebo. And I told my doctors this, like, you know, doctors, you know, we can't speak in certainties, but we tend to agree with you. So, but the latest and greatest on that is, since I've been in the clinical trial for a year now, the tumor has actually began to shrink. It's still within the margin of error, but it's shrinking, and that's the right direction. So, cool. So I got this brain thing going here. Just going to go over a couple other quick points. And you can see this illustration up here. That is not the font that I used. I apologize. I'm not into cartoons. But this is the illustration that, in my opinion, sums up my resilience and how I was able to bounce back and bounce back stronger. What is the goal of every trauma, every traumatic experience? What is the goal from bouncing back? Give you a hint, it's up there, yeah. Yeah, back to baseline, some sort of growth, right? If we're not growing, what is a natural progression? If we're not moving forward, we're moving backward. There's no, standing still. You're moving in some direction in life, right? So growth is always the objective, all right? And we're going to, for the sake of this illustration, we're going to work from the top down because I want to save the identity. That's save the best for last. All right, so these are 4 pillars. These are mindset pillars. Mindset is the belief that our most basic qualities can be changed. So there's 2 types of mindsets, right? Who knows what they are? What's that? Growth mindset is one, and set or fix is the other. A fixed mindset, somebody who has a fixed mindset believes that talents, skills are static. So there's no point in expelling effort. There's no point in trying. Somebody with a growth mindset says that, hey, your skills, your talents, your abilities are dynamic, but only through effort. Okay? So these pillars, if you want to steal this illustration, make one for yourself, I encourage you to do that. Feel free. These are pillars that will put you and keep you in a growth mindset. First pillar, reminding. Sounds simple, right? Like kind of confusing, but I kind of thought about it. Like one day it just kind of dawned on me, like, hey, our minds have this very unique ability. Our minds can talk to itself. I'm not sure if birds or dogs can do that, but our minds can call to mind past experiences. Don't think about an elephant. There you go. You all thought about an elephant, I would assume, right? So, but reminding, we can call to mind past experiences, things in the past where we overcame or we have overcome tragedy or painful experiences. I know that's not a pleasant thing to do, but it's a worthwhile endeavor. And if we don't take the time to remember at the first sign of tragedy or trauma, if we don't take the time to remember how we got past trauma or pain in the past, we are starting at square one every single time. It's like a life hack. Like if you remember how you overcame, bounced back, you get to skip a couple squares, right? you know, people wear bracelets, carry things in their pocket. For me, reminding always comes when I have an itch on the top of my head, because feel that titanium plate and the screws. So for me, scratching my head is a good reminder. I've come a long way. I mean, I'm here, and even preparing for these presentations and talking to you here, I'm encouraged just because I'm reminded of how far I've come, of what I've overcome. I mean, I had brain surgery. Grit. Grit is the next pillar. There are two ingredients to grit: passion and perseverance. Passion plus perseverance equals grit. If you don't have passion, you don't have perseverance. Sorry, you don't have grit. Passion. Passion is steadfast. Passion is commitment. If you don't have passion, your eye is going to be drawn to the next shiny thing, whatever that thing is. If it's shiny and if you like kind of like it just a little bit and you don't have passion for one thing, you're going to leave that thing and start following this other thing, right? I had a passion for aviation since I was a kid. Sure, there was a lot of other cool stuff that I could have been, but I had this deep passion for aviation, so I always remained on that track. I always continued to pursue a future in aviation and in military aviation. Perseverance. If you don't persevere, again, you can't have grit. Perseverance is again, well, perseverance isn't, if you don't have perseverance, I'll say it this way. If you don't have perseverance, you're going to stop at the first tinge of pain. Whenever you feel that first tinge of discomfort, you're going to stop. You're going to hit the stop button, big red button, throttle back, whatever. You're going to stop. Okay? Talent, IQ, family background, genetics, test scores, financial, socioeconomic status, those will only get you so far. It is grit that's going to fill in the gaps and take you that extra step. Okay? Gratitude. It is the mother of all emotions. I didn't coin that phrase, Cicero did. Gratitude is easy. It's an easy concept. It's an easy thing to say. It's an easy thing to preach, but it's a difficult thing to apply in a daily life. It's a very difficult thing to practice on a consistent basis, but it is imperative that we do. And for me personally, when I was most grateful was when I was at my lowest. When I had found out that my cancer was malignant, that I had oligodendroglioma, that this was going to be something that I was most likely going to have to fight the rest of my life, and that I would no longer be able to fly, that I was going to lose my wings, that I would have to leave and go to another assignment, I quickly realized I've got a wife that is going to follow me wherever I go. You know? And that, you know, when you start knocking all the worldly props out from underneath you, you finally get a good view of what you have. And then faith. I was talking to that gentleman back there. This is the number one thing. If I were to pick one thing that got me back to baseline or higher than baseline, it would be my faith. Faith isn't necessarily, you know, belief in a higher power. You know, you can treat faith like a expectant persistence. You know, I believe that I might not necessarily be plucked out of this, but I'm going to get through this, right? And my faith, you know, there are a number of different promises in my faith, and I had to hang my hat on all those promises. You know, and today, just here in this room, I have faith. I have to claim to a truth that somebody in this room needed to hear this message, and that this message will change somebody's life. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years. And if I don't have my faith, I mean, I'm lost. I have no hope. Now, all these pillars stand on a foundation. They are all set up on a structure, an identity. This is for you all to come up on your own. Who here has, by a show of hands, who here has actually taken the time to put pen to paper and actually articulate and write down who you are, what your identity statement is, about what I expected. It is important to understand who we are. Only when we come up with an identity statement and understand it completely, consider your values, then you can set up pillars, strategies, tactics to overcoming setbacks. Now, if your identity doesn't jive or fall in line with a pillar, the pillar is going to fall. Your values have to be in line with your pillars. Okay? Trying to think of an example here. Somebody who doesn't value nutrition. Do you think that a pillar for eating healthy for the sake of growth, do you think that that would support growth? It would make you, you'd grow, not in the direction you intended to. But that's just one example of how, you need to consider your values. What are things that are most important about you? What are the truths that are undeniably true about you? What are your beliefs? What are your values? You need to take these into consideration when you come up and craft an identity statement. Everything begins at the identity, okay? And from there, you can build upon your identity and craft and choose and select what strategies work best for you, because this is a very personal thing.
One of the things that I found it late in my career, but it's very effective, is the kitchen table, right? It's been brought up here. Go to any firehouse around the country, kitchen table. It's where we all bitch, right? It's where we all solve the world's problems, right? It's also where senior men and women impart the stories of the big fires, the big calls, the big incidents, right? Everybody's had roles in that, right? So one of the things that I ask everybody is, if you've been a part of those table conversations, how many of those big incidents and the traumatic incidents that we've all responded to, how many times have you ever heard anybody to discuss how those calls affected them and things that they were dealing with it? Has anybody been involved with those conversations, and has that topic ever come up?
Because I had an incident at a bad fire, everything operationally went off good, but that was the one that filled my bag, and I decided to get treatment after. I didn't decide. That was a mess. So I got treatment, and I got back up on my feet, and I came back to work, and I joined a peer support team so that I can say to the guys, hey, if you're feeling like you need help, you're not alone. I needed it, I got it, and I'm back. So, I do that to, it helps me, and it takes the pressure off the new guy who might be reaching out thinking he's alone.
And kind of one of the reasons that I brought up that subject is as senior guys and girls in this profession, when we sit there and we talk about all those major incidents that we've run, all the traumatic events, we talk about it as part of the job and part of what we do, but we never attach any emotion or feeling to that. And when you look at that, when I came on the job, those guys were people that I looked up to, and they set the tone on how I should act. And what we're doing by not having those uncomfortable conversations about how those calls affect us as senior people is we're telling another whole generation to suck it up and not express those feelings. And it's been my experience when people knew that I was working in the veteran space. I had people reach out to me all the time, and it's amazing when you share that you've had, you don't have to go into great details, but when you share that you're having some struggles or some issues with those calls, you'd be amazed at the amount of dialogue that opens up, because it really needs to become normal, because what we do is not normal, right? It may be normal to us, it's not normal to the outside world, and it really, we have to make it normal to have these conversations at the fire station. We're out there helping everyone in the world, right? But we can't sit at a table and have that conversation and try and help our brother and sister firefighters. And really starting that dialogue, you'd be amazed if you start having that dialogue at the station, how much it'll open up other people. Because pretty much, if you've ever had somebody break down at the fire station after a call, what happens? Is that person alienated? No. We go to their aid, right? So we got to be not afraid to have those difficult conversations. Otherwise, we're going to create another generation that's just sucking it up. And as we know from everybody in this room, that's not working out too well for us as a fire service.
I would agree with it completely. How do you set the table in the kitchen? It takes courage. I'm looking at a whole family that has courage, but it takes courage to start the conversation. So I would ask the question, I see some folks that look like they have some collective years of experience here. How could you start the conversation at the kitchen table and actually talk about vulnerability as opposed to it's just who we are, it's just what we do, it's just another day? How could you actually model, particularly for the younger firefighters, but also for yourselves, that this actually impacted us because we're human beings? Makes sense. And I think that it's important. So if you are at the kitchen table, the courageous firefighter is able to say, wow, that was really hard for me. That was really hard for me. Six words. And then be quiet. And say, how about you guys? How did it impact you? That's it. Not how are you feeling, but simply, that was really tough. That was a tough one for me. I've been doing this for 14 years. This one was hard. That's all you need to say, and then look and say, how hard was it for you? So I've been with O2X since the beginning, which is 8 years, and we've done umpteen workshops out at Moon Island and every other place for the Boston department and then others. And I immediately start talking about the big word vulnerability. That if you are a first responder, you have post-traumatic stress, by definition. Now let's talk about the stress. Let's talk about how it looks. And then let's talk about the ways that you manage it that might not be that healthy. You know, like when your best friend is Michelob, right? So, or other things. Or getting mad at kicking the cat, or whatever it is that you do. And Adam, am I right? In about 20 minutes, everyone's saying, yeah, that's a problem for me. Yeah, that's a problem for me. Yeah, what else could we do? So I think that if you create a platform, a table, a kitchen table, wherever you go, and you say, this is hard, people will talk, and you model it yourself. Adam and I, a few years ago, after 2 of your firefighters in Boston perished in a fire, we were trying to figure out ways with the chief to figure out a way to really help. I think it was the Boylston Street fire station. So we decided the best way to have a kitchen table experience was to let them feed us. So 5 nights in a row, Adam and I found ourselves on Boylston Street at their fire engine company, and boy, did they feed us well, number one. And number two, because we were hanging out at the kitchen table, and we did it for 5 nights, so we got all the different people in the fire station, you know, at different times. We talked, we cried, we laughed, we told stories. Mostly Adam and I listened. So I would tell you that it's not hard to help people develop resilience, and you're so right. It starts by modeling courage, which is vulnerability. So I challenge you.
And just to share my my genesis for those conversations at the kitchen table is I had one of my good friends that I work with at the fire department and also Aeromedical wise, and he'd come to me because he was suicidal, and I shared what some of my struggles were, and I was always the the guy who never showed any emotion. I was the guy who was never flapped by anything, and when I told him about my struggles, he was shocked, and I think that's kind of the thing. If you're seen as somebody who is a leader, if you're seen as somebody who is tough and that things don't bother them, they feel that they need to emulate that same behavior and start, and I can tell you from experience, tucking it away, it doesn't work. It does in the short term, but it doesn't work. And that was kind of my genesis for having those conversations, and I was amazed at how free the conversations were that came out after that.
Yeah, I think a few of the lessons that we learned from one, we get the great opportunity to travel around the United States and talk to a lot of different departments and a lot of different tactical services, some in federal, some in the special operations community, kind of piece and pull the onion and back a little bit and see behind the curtain and talk to them. And a lot of the questions come up is like, I don't know about the resilience side or the stress management side. I don't know how you're gonna get that. Well, I'm not gonna walk in the door the first day and say, all right, guys, let's start talking about the tough topics here, right? I want them to understand that to be our best for ourselves, for our teammates, for our families, like we have to learn how to manage stress because we have stressful jobs, right? It's due to the nature, but that's the warrior culture when you think about it. Like back from back in caveman days when you're out there, chasing lions and standing around a fire and talking about these things and talking about that builds a community. And we did that in the military. We did that in the special operations community. And we learned that because we had to do that because we buried so much for so long. And the consistent deployments and combat rotations overseas were like, okay, we have to have a check-in. We call it check up from the neck up. Like we have to start doing these things. And it didn't make people, there wasn't any pushback. It was like, of course, we'll get in line and we'll sit down and we'll talk with the psychologist. We'll get in and do resilience seminars and sessions like that. We'll start talking about these tougher topics, even things about financial stress and stress at home, interacting with loved ones and all that stuff. But this was all to make us as best we can be, to have a very healthy career and then finish our careers as strong as we started and enjoy the retirement. But after a while, when we kept on doing these things, like, well, these aren't going away. This is what we're going to do before we go on deployment and when we get back from deployments and when during incidents we're going to debrief because we're all trying to get better. And you know what? It made us a better fighting force. It made us better warriors, right? So you guys are all warriors in your own right. And for us, when you're looking at a bomber pilot, well, guess what? That airplane is lethal. And so we're trying to make the people in it as lethal as possible, too, because that's what our job entails to do. Same thing in the SEAL community. We are all embrace that warrior culture, that warrior spirit, that there is a higher calling and faith in that, we need to come home safe to our families every single night, and taking care of our brains is really important on that. And we signed up for that challenging job, and we embraced those challenges, and that got us excited about it. But with that came a tough side to the job, that we needed to police our own and take care of ourselves. And I could not be prouder of a lot of the departments that are out there, the people that would go and they would say, hey, I need to take a knee for this deployment, or I need to go check out for a bit. That, if anything, that in the special operation community, that built trust amongst your peers. And you know what? Those people came back and were better operators. The best operators I ever saw were the ones with families, the ones through challenging times, the ones that had to say, get help, come back, and they came back stronger. They really were. They had post-traumatic growth. And they were better operators, better leaders, and they inspired and they changed the culture of the organization. And the most important thing is that you kind of you do things like this. You start having these dialogue. You start talking about those you do those debriefs in AARs, right? You check in on families. You know who's having a divorce, who has a tough time, or having a kid with challenges. It's like you don't run away from those things, like you know that they're bothering people. you know, you gauge those things in productive and right ways, and they build a stronger fighting force. They build stronger warriors. And that was inspiring to us, and I've seen it happen in a lot of different departments. I've seen it happen with, we've worked with Broward County, Broward Sheriff's Office, and you know what happened after we started working with them? Well, there was a school shooting. You guys all remember that, right? And a lot of those first responders were there. And it was lucky that we did that stuff up front, at least a couple tools in their toolbox to take with them, because you don't wait for those things to happen to be like, oh, is a typical knee-jerk reaction from a department. There's a ton of suicides. We need to do something. Well, we need to get upstream of these things, just like we're trying to prevent injuries. And you know what happened down in Broward after that? Well, then there was the airport shooting, right? These things are not going to stop happening in our communities. We chose this life. We chose this profession. So we have to make sure that we build that resilience any way we can. It's all through training and education and community. And it's an amazing community that we have here, and it shows by the numbers, the excitement about this topic, and just to continue to build on it.
In response to the generational thing, my husband was in the SEAL teams for 27 years. And after 9/11, it was a good 8-9 years before I even heard the word resilience. And in that time, these guys are fully operational. They're going out all the time. They're on a roll. They're loving it. But they're worried at that time about being pulled off the job if they show any weakness. So in the checkup from the neck up, it's like 10-15 minutes with a psych. How you doing? Totally fine. I'm fine, right? We're all fine. And their number one worry was not being able to go back and do their job. So the job suffers last. Their life is falling apart. They have debt. They're drinking too much. I was a probation officer for some of those years, and I would see guys from the command on the jail roster every morning when I'd go into work. So there are alcohol-related incidents happening, domestic violence disputes, but they're fine, right? The job suffers last. So there's all these issues in all the other areas of their life, but their bandwidth is just lessening. So they're pulling energy from all these other areas of their life and not really paying attention to do the job. So you're not going to see problems on the job until the very last minute. So the generational thing I think that would help fill that gap is what we're doing now, and pulling the stigma. So if you know that you're not going to lose your job because you're asking for help, that's huge, right? Because I think in years past, people were worried that they're not going to be able to do their job, or they're going to get kicked off the force, or they're going to be put on light duty or something. So just bringing attention to these things and talking about it is filling that gap for sure.
In many Fortune 500 companies, you go to HR and say, I have a problem with prescription drugs. I have a problem with substance use disorder. You cannot get fired. You get to go to rehab. You get to be paid while you go to rehab, and then they welcome you back. There needs to be something that is not punitive so that you actually can say, I have a problem because alcoholism is substance use disorder, and it's medical. And you need to be able to go to your HR, and you need to do it just like I have migraines, I have cancer. And you need to not be punished for getting the medical help you need. And this is, we've had a COVID crisis. The next 3 years will be a mental health crisis, because the anxiety, depression, as you know, I know because that's my field, it is out of control, and our mental health system does not provide enough, but that's not the issue. If you are in a company where it's punitive to say that you're unhealthy and you need help, that has to change. So I speak to the leadership when I say that. It has to actually be brave and courageous. I say all the time, the best sign of mental health is asking for help. The best sign. So there's got to be somebody there willing to give it, and you can't be punished for it.
And the dovetail on that, we keep applying a solution to this problem when it's out of control, right? if we don't have these difficult conversations at the firehouse and we don't start addressing these issues and being honest with each other, right, we just keep losing people to suicides, heart disease, all the stresses of the job, right? If we, like, that's not where we need to apply the solution, you know? We need to limit the number of people that go over the edge. And the only way we're gonna do that is to realize our job is not normal. What we see is effed up, right? And be honest with each other. Because if we, like, there's nobody that's going to understand you as well as your brothers and sisters that you work with. Not your families, not even the counselors sometimes, right? And the biggie is finding a counselor that is trauma informed, someone that is familiar with your occupation, because, you know, a bad experience with a counselor just, you know, sets things off. But develop good relationships with your union, with counselors that are familiar with your population, especially because most of us walk around with PTS and PTSD. It may not be diagnosed, but we have it. And it doesn't have to be that you're in crisis, right? The conversations I'm talking about is that these calls affect all of us. And you don't have to have PTSD, right, to have these calls affect us and talk about the fact. And really, if the management here is obviously doing a lot of good things to make changes, if it's not in your place, it's on you guys to make the change, right? And sometimes that change comes from the top down, sometimes comes from the bottom up, but it's got to be okay to have these conversations.